raw, untamed power. And beyond that, something truly special.
Hello, and welcome to Film Rant. I'm so lucky to be doing these video reviews when I am because I'm doing it in a time where I get to review new Star Wars movies. It's a shame that The Force Awakens was average and Rogue One was utter shit, but I'm sure I'll get a good Star Wars movie eventually. Actually, if I'm being totally honest, none of the Star Wars movies are without their faults. Empire is definitely the best, but that still has its problems and it doesn't necessarily blow me away. There's stuff to love and hate about every Star Wars movie, and that's possibly what makes them a big topic of conversation in popular culture. Everyone likes and dislikes different things about Star Wars movies, and I think that's important to consider when going into this review. For example, I don't think Anakin Skywalker is a bad character. Some people absolutely hate him. Same for Jar Jar. I don't mind Jar Jar. I understand why he's disliked, but he honestly doesn't bother me that much. Similarly, lots of people love Rey, whereas I think she's boring as all hell. But has The Last Jedi changed my mind on that? Well, I'll be going into spoiler territory, so go to a cinema in a galaxy far, far away if you don't want anything spoiled. I will give a short non-spoiler review though. The Last Jedi is okay. So let's talk about the new characters, and I'm going to start by talking about Poe Dameron. Sure, he was in The Force Awakens, but you never really got to know anything about him. Oscar Isaac, who is one of my favourite actors by the way, plays a much bigger role in this movie, so we got to see what Poe is all about. I actually really like Poe. The movie seems to be setting up as a new leader for the rebellion, most likely replacing the late Carrie Fisher. However, it also introduces some character issues in that he seems impulsive and a bit of a hothead, which is something I feel could be exploited by Kylo Ren. It would be interesting if we got a Star Wars movie where the leader of the rebellion must turn to the dark side and sabotage the rebellion from within. Poe could be the guy to do that, but we'll have to wait and see. Anyway, I thoroughly enjoyed Poe in this movie. Another new addition was Rose Tico, played by Kelly Marie Tran, and I just didn't like her. She's a bit of a goody two-shoes and I just found her a bit annoying. I mean, I don't really think she has any chemistry with John Boyega, and their surprise romance reveal at the end was something I didn't see coming at all. I kind of think that's the point because Finn seems to be just as surprised by the kiss as the audience are, but if we were meant to ship them as a couple, it didn't really work. I didn't enjoy her character at all, or the plotline she was included in. Maybe some of you did, but she just wasn't for me. I thought Kylo Ren was excellent in this movie. The exploration of his torn soul was brilliant. Watching he and Rey trade experiences and thoughts was such a joy to watch, and it was wonderful to see his conflict with Snoke and his inner conflicts when faced with killing his mother. I've always believed that he didn't press the button on the saber to kill Han, and Han did it himself to save Kylo from Snoke. I've always figured since the first episode that Kylo was going to turn to the light, and I think most people probably thought that. We've kind of seen it before where Vader overthrows the Emperor, but it's only for a few minutes before he does. I wanted Kylo to turn in this episode, and maybe have Rey go over to the dark side so that the final movie has a full 2 hours or so to explore a newly turned Darksider working for the rebellion. So I loved everything about Kylo that pointed to that element of his character, which led to me being almost angry when he just decides to become a predictable darkside prick at the end. If he stays full darkside in the next movie, he'll be just as boring as the rest of the Sith villains. Well, it's not that they're boring as such, but it's becoming a bit stale. Do something new with the villains! His switch to typical darkside villain was more disappointing than Anakin Skywalker's babysitting skills. As for Rey, yeah, there's still not one interesting thing about her. She's a Mary Sue. She's too infallible and just dull. In fact, the only remotely interesting thing about her is that she's unremarkable in terms of her lineage. She's a nobody who has become a hero. Again though, that's not new. Anakin Skywalker was the son of an enslaved woman. I mean, sure, he was born by midichlorians, which I think we can all agree was bullshit, but ultimately Anakin came from nothing either. But Anakin turns into Darth Vader though, so it's interesting to see how that happens. Unless Rey turns into something incredibly powerful, like a new Yoda or new Vader, then she's completely uninteresting, and I still think that's the case. Finally, for characters, what is the point of Captain Phasma? She's bigged up as this important character in both movies, but she's about as important as Rogue One was to the Star Wars timeline. She's just a bit pointless. Is her total screen time across both movies less than 3 minutes? I don't get why the marketing really pushes her when she's such a minor character. She's barely more important than a regular bog standard stormtrooper. She's like Boba Fett but without being overrated. She looks awesome, is barely in the trilogy, and is killed off relatively easily. I mean, I assume she's killed off, she kind of falls into an inferno, but then again so did Gwyneth Paltrow in Iron Man 3 and she survived. But that movie was fucking awful, so I won't take any logic from it. Maybe her silver armor just happens to be strongest against fire and she's going to come back in the third movie. Who knows? If she does, please do something interesting with her. She's the most pointless character in the Star Wars universe. As for the script, I think the whole Resistance storyline is a bit flat. For a good 80% of the movie, we just see the Resistance ship stranded in front of a First Order ship, which begins to become a bit of a boring situation after a while. That's a kind of story that you'd maybe have for 20 minutes of a movie max, not nearly 2 hours worth. It wouldn't be so bad if the accompanying storyline to it, Finn and Rose's mission to recruit a codebreaker, wasn't so boring either. A lot of that story felt like filler, but the only interesting thing about it was Benicio del Toro's character, who is a guy who sells arms to both sides of the war. He's actually the only character in the movie that succeeds at what he's doing. Kylo fails to turn Rey, and vice versa. Luke fails to train Rey properly, Hux doesn't get the power he's been seeking, Snoke doesn't kill Rey, Poe and Finn both fail their roles of saving the fleet and disabling the tracker, Leia and the Resistance only just managed to survive by the skin of their teeth. It's settled, Del Toro is the next big prodigy, fuck Rey. Anyway, he remains neutral because he says they're both as bad as each other, and I've always thought that for years with Star Wars. Sure, the Empire blew up Alderaan, but then the Rebels blew up a Death Star, which is still murdering thousands if not millions of people. Same goes for the destruction of the second Death Star and Starkiller Base, so yeah, they're as bad as each other. I love the line Del Toro says when he betrays the Resistance, like, "It's no big deal, they shoot you today, you shoot them tomorrow." Now, what would have been interesting is if they had introduced that idea to Rey, which brings me on to her storyline. I thought the plot with her, Luke, Kylo and Snoke was utterly gripping. That was the real meat of the movie. I mean, they could have made an entire movie with just those characters and it would have been solid. Exploring Luke's disenfranchised views on the Jedi was a refreshing take on the Jedi themselves, and it was an absolute treat to get to see Mark Hamill back as the very troubled Luke Skywalker, given possibly the best performance of his career. I thought Rey and Kylo's Force conversations, similar to Luke and Vader's, were very interesting, and it was great to see them begin to understand each other, even if they both had ulterior motives to talking to one another. Those scenes were intense, thoroughly well acted, and provided most of the depth to the plot. One particular element of that plot I liked was when Kylo tries to recruit Rey and he says, "Join me, and together we can take out the Sith and the Jedi. We can end this," or something along those lines. Now, since he suggests taking out the Sith and the Jedi, both sides, that plays into Benicio del Toro's outlook on this war. If Rey had been introduced to the idea that they're both as bad as each other, I'd have thought she might have been more inclined to take up Kylo on his offer, and that scene would have had much more gravitas to it, and it could also come into play in the final movie. However, given how The Last Jedi played out, the final movie seems like it's not going to have any real surprises. The Last Jedi really does seem like a final trilogy film rather than a mid-trilogy film, and that's both good and bad. It makes this movie quite entertaining with a few surprises here and there, but leaves barely anything up its sleeve for the final movie, which they're going to have to perform a miracle with if they want to make it a decent watch. There's a few stupid moments in this movie, and I'll save the best for last. The first I wish to address is Rose's choice to save John Boyega from certain death at the end by crashing her ship into his, which out of context seems like a batshit idea. And even in context, it's still a batshit idea. Finn is about to crash his speeder into the First Order's pulse cannon or whatever it's called in order to blow up and save the Resistance from having their front doors smashed in.
That's what she said!
Michael, please.
There he is.
Please.
Mwah! There he is. Come on.
She flies her ship into his, crushing both of them to stop him completing his suicide mission because she loves him, even though there's been literally no hint at a romantic attraction between them at all. It's also completely psychotic that she'd even do that. She endangers the entire Resistance just to save one guy who'd made up his mind on how he wanted to die. It kind of draws parallels with Poe, who throughout the movie has thought blowing stuff up is the only solution to everything. Maybe she was trying to teach him that isn't the case, but at the moment she saves Finn, there really wasn't any other option. Finn had to commit suicide by blowing up that cannon. They didn't know Luke or the Falcon was going to turn up. So yeah, she's stupid and crazy and Finn needs to get the fuck out of there. Another moment that didn't sit right with me was Luke's fleeting thought of murdering Kylo Ren in his sleep. Not the first time we've heard of that, is it, Palpatine? I totally understand that for all intents and purposes Luke is kind of a bad Jedi. He's susceptible to manipulation. We see in Return of the Jedi that he's manipulated by the Emperor into almost killing him while he's unarmed. almost being the key word there. And he unleashes that anger until he defeats Vader, but even with all that anger in him, he still sees the good in Vader and pulls him back from the dark side to save the day. So, if Luke Skywalker can save a guy who has slaughtered innocent children, blown up entire planets, and broke Natalie Portman's heart, then surely he wouldn't be tempted to murder a fucking child in his sleep because he was having some dark dreams. Sure, Kylo was definitely on a path to the dark side and Luke isn't a good trainer, but I just don't believe that Luke would murder a child before he'd even done anything wrong just because he might have turned to the dark side. You can't even argue that he was able to turn Vader because he was his father either. Kylo was Luke's nephew. Hell, given how tight he was with Han and Leia, Luke is probably like a second father to Kylo. I just don't buy that even if just for a second or two Luke would consider murdering Kylo to the point where he actually has his lightsaber drawn and he's hovering above him in bed. Maybe it worked for you, but I just thought it was silly. As I said, best till last. I think we all know which stupid moment I'm going to talk about here. Leia's fake death. She gets blown the fuck out of her control center near the beginning of the movie and she floats out into space. It was very sad and touching to see her float away all yondued up, and you know what? I'd have been fine if that's how Leia went. It was nice to see her begin to use the Force a little as she floated away. She kind of moves bits of the debris around her. If we saw that and then she died, that would have been a decent way to send her off. But no, she just straight up Ramona flowers her way back on board the ship and does her best impression of Channing Tatum in Kingsman 2 by going in a coma for the rest of the movie, only to turn up and save the day at the end. This fake death was probably one of the clunkiest and worst executed moments in any Star Wars movie, and it really hurt the movie's overall quality. I've not met one person yet who didn't think this part was utterly ridiculous. How Rian Johnson thought this was a good idea, I'll never know. Maybe he didn't and Disney went over his head. We'll never know. I feel like I've been quite negative so far, but there is some things to enjoy in The Last Jedi. I think this movie might contain my favourite Star Wars moment ever, actually, so it's got that going for it. That moment would be Luke's death. The reason for his death seems a little unclear. Did he use all of his energy to make a kind of projected light version of himself and it just killed him off? Who the fuck knows, but they did his death scene the only way it should have been done. He looks out at two setting suns as the crescendo of the background orchestra sweeps in and he passes on as the suns set. That moment was absolute fucking magic. It's a key part of Luke's character to look at the suns on Tatooine. It was a great moment in A New Hope and they redid it in Revenge of the Sith when Luke is delivered to Uncle Owen and Aunt Beru. So to come full circle again with Luke's death was just wonderful to behold. Rian Johnson, you fucking nailed this moment. Well done. I also enjoyed the scene with Yoda and Luke as Yoda basically tells him that the sacred Jedi texts are all bullshit and you only truly learn through failure, which kind of runs through the film. As I said earlier, everybody fails at what they aim to do. I do think The Last Jedi relies on nostalgia a little too much at times, but the addition of Yoda was tastefully done and it made sense within the narrative. Although you also have to question why Ben Kenobi isn't still guiding Luke. Obviously it's because Alec Guinness is dead, so they wouldn't necessarily be able to include him, but I'm just thinking about this from the viewpoint of Star Wars lore. I know it's nitpicky, but it's worth mentioning. Another thing that may also be nitpicky, I feel that whenever the new movies add something new to the Force, you have to wonder why it was never done in earlier films. Yoda manages to create a lightning bolt using the Force, even though he's dead. So Yoda can manipulate the Force and the real world, even in his Jedi spirit form. If that's the case, how come he did jack shit in Return of the Jedi? Is it only Yoda that can do it? If not, how come Qui-Gon or Ben Kenobi couldn't do it either? I didn't dislike this, but it did make me think. Possibly the most surprising moment in The Last Jedi was the death of Snoke. I think the majority of us expected Leia or Luke to die, but when they killed Snoke, I was left a little perplexed. While I like what unfolded and how Kylo did it, I also just kind of thought, okay. Are we ever going to find out who he was? Why was he doing what he was doing? How he came to find and recruit Kylo? I guess we'll be told some of these in the final movie, but with him being dead, I don't think any of the answers will have as much weight to them as they would if he was alive. It also leads me to think that Kylo is going to be the big villain of the next movie, if not the entire trilogy. And to me, that seems a little odd. I feel like Kylo is too weak to be the main baddie. We needed someone like Snoke at the helm that kind of loomed over everything. He was this unknown entity, clearly very powerful with the Force, and let's face it, the Star Wars series loves deformed evil villains. Kylo Ren just doesn't seem that scary a dude, and I don't like putting him up as the main villain for the trilogy. I want somebody bigger, badder, and meaner. Who knows, maybe we'll get that in the next movie, but it would be kind of weird to just introduce a new big villain for one movie. It can be done, but it's difficult to pull off. The comedy in The Last Jedi was mostly welcomed. There's some decent banter between Finn and Rose, BB-8 is an absolute standout once again, and some of Luke's dialogue is brilliant. There is the odd bit here and there though that's a bit stupid. Poor prank calling the First Order at the beginning of the movie was a good laugh, but then they threw in a mother joke and I kind of groaned a little. The Last Jedi is a pretty thematically heavy movie, but for the most part, the comedy helps to relieve that a little. From a technical standpoint, The Last Jedi suffers from lots of pacing issues. Even if you're utterly engrossed in the movie from start to finish, it's easy to see that it goes full Return of the King and has about 50 different places where it could end. I figured the movie would end when the Resistance managed to escape to the planet they were trying to get to, but nope, we have a full 20-minute Hoth Round 2 battle. This section was thoroughly entertaining, but it did feel to come out of nowhere. The script itself seems pretty solid, but I think the execution and editing gave the movie a sort of jagged feel, and some scenes don't really connect with each other very well. This movie has a runtime of 2 hours 33 minutes, and it really feels like that when you're watching it. I think Rian could have definitely made this film a little tighter. Overall, I think The Last Jedi is much like The Force Awakens. It's an enjoyable Star Wars movie, but it's also got a metric fuck ton of flaws. Rey is still boring, Rose isn't a great addition, 2 of the 3 storylines in the movie are a little dull, there's some utterly stupid moments like Leia's death and some moments that kind of go against character. However, there's also some truly magnificent scenes and really solid action scenes that excite and entertain. It really balances itself like Anakin brought balance to the Force. Like all Star Wars movies though, it's subject to the viewer. I call myself a Star Wars fan, and I don't mind Jar Jar Binks. You call yourself a Star Wars fan, but you hate Jar Jar. Neither of us is wrong in our opinion. That's the beauty of Star Wars. There's that much content, innovation and creativity in these movies that lots of people can consider themselves fans even if they have drastically different opinions on the movies, TV shows, games or whatever. So please, bear that in mind when talking with others in the comments below. Let's just be grateful that we're all alive in the same era that these movies are being made and enjoy them while we still can. Star Wars Episode 8 The Last Jedi gets 3.5 frames out of 5. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time on Film Rant.